Welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast, where we empower you to build a better ranch and transform your operations into a thriving business. I'm your host, John Haskell. Let's get started. Wally Olson, welcome again to the Ranchonomics Podcast. We need to make you an honorary co-host on this deal. I am glad to have you here, and I am excited to talk with you about today's topic, which is markets. Nice to have you back.
I'm thrilled to be here.
We want to talk about markets today, and last week was the last big of what I think of as the summer series of sales. So we have Superior's Week in the Rockies, the big Winnemucca sale, and then I'm drawing a blank on the name, the Bighorn sale here in Sheridan. And lots of yearlings and calves sold. There's been a lot of talk about the market this year, a lot of talk about the fact that the market is very high, and yet there's also been a lot of disappointment in the market. So I would like you to talk a little about your perspective on where things are at right now.
Well, very good. One thing, first thing I'm going to say is it doesn't really matter where the price is at. It's relationships that you're working with. And when I'm talking about relationships, I am talking about basically three relationships. And, those are relationships looking forward. And the reason I'm talking about relationship looking forward, most people use relationship of looking back. And this is buy-sell marketing is looking back. You see what you paid for them and what you can sell them for. And that has nothing to do with what you should do because you can't change it. I have seen ranches lost because they looked back and they said, by God, I ain't going to sell those yearlings for that. I'm going to feed them. When that was all over with, the ranch was gone. And the reason is when you didn't sell out, you put them in the feed yard, granted the feed yard would buy half of them and they'll finance the feed, but it tied up all your equity to run your ranch. And that's what you should be focused on, is running your ranch. And to me, you can always trade back to a little one. So for God's sakes, you always want to be looking at the relationships looking forward. This is what I have to sell. This is what I can buy back.
And we get trapped when we think about the dollar price, right? That whatever the price is, the absolute value in dollars really is the most irrelevant part of the whole thing, correct?
Correct.
Now, when we deal with a lender, that money, that dollar amount matters, right? Because that's what we have to pay back the lender that we borrowed from. But other than that, there is really no relevance of the price. The relationship is the only thing that really matters.
And then you're looking at the relationships between classes of animals and deciding what is undervalued and purchasing that. You understand what I'm saying? And then the third relationship is the cost, the relationships of what it's going to cost you to do the business.
So explain that a little more. This is the cost of owning the animals, keeping them alive, getting them to their next.
So the next level, really what it is whatever you sell. I'll give you an example. You sell an 800-pound yearling.
Yep.
You go buy a 500-pound calf. That's 300 pounds. And whenever you're doing sell by marketing, you've got to take whatever you buy, you got to have the money to take it back to what you sold. So in other words, you need the money to put 300 pounds on that 500-pound calf. Now you probably won't, and it doesn't matter, but you need to have that much capital.
Yeah.
To do it.
And what we're trying to do there a lot of times is compare like to like, right? If I sell a 700 or an 800 and I buy a 500, well, hopefully I'm putting cash in my pocket, but I should be sort of discounting the cash I get by the cost of getting back to where I started, correct?
That's correct.
And again, this is not because we're comparing that original purchase price. That is a sunk cost. We are best to put that price out of our mind as quickly as we can. And yet we sort of create a situation where we almost artificially sort of make ourselves equal at two different points. And the difference between a 500-pounder and an 800-pounder is literally the cost of putting on that 300 pounds. So that may cost us $1 a day on grass. That may cost us
$3 a day in the feed yard, whatever.
whatever, but the way you do it and your specific costs are what you use to figure out how to sort of make those two things equivalent, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Very good.
The next thing, we're going to talk about some things today that will stray from what I'm about to say, but the one thing you do is you deal with today.
Yes.
Whatever you're doing is you deal with today, and then you use good math to mitigate fear and greed.
Okay. Now, when we talk about today, we do a few things very specifically in a Bud Williams sell-buy marketing framework. Tell me a little what you mean by dealing with today. Help me with that.
When you're looking at stuff, you look at it as, what is happening today. You aren't guessing what the cattle, just say you buy a 500-pound calf and you're going to graze it, and you don't look at what the market is out in October or whatever. You look at what the relationships of what's happening today and what you own and what you can buy.
Now, we have some friends that are in this business of future predicting, but are you saying that sometimes those predictions are not reliable?
I would love somebody to do a study on that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because I really would. I mean, I'm serious. I would really like to see somebody do a study. One old rancher I grew up with, he said, I don't listen to one-armed economists because he said they're always talking about on the other hand. So he figured if you had a one-armed economist, you could listen to them and stuff.
Let's talk about a couple of things related to that, because I just read it again, and I'm not going to remember exactly the source or the exact details, but it is along the lines, and I think this was a study done by Forbes or Fidelity or somebody, but in the world of stocks, so, like the S&P 500 type thing, in the world of stocks, the rates of return over a 10-year period are on the average of around 10%. And what's fascinating to me is, of course, that's not a steady 10% per, it doesn't just march along at 10%, but it, some days are good, some days are bad. And what they've found over and over again is that is the average return. And there is a stat that says if you miss something along the lines of the biggest 10 days, and I think it might even be fewer than that if you miss those biggest 10 days, you're out of the market for 10 days that are, sort of the wrong days, if you will, your returns go to 3%. In a 10-year period, if you're out of the market for, I think it's another 10 days, you basically go to break even. And what that says to me is that nobody actually knows what's going to happen. Because if they would predict the market correctly, then those 10 days wouldn't be so devastating to the average return, right? But what we have by being in the market constantly is we have the opportunity not to miss those massive unexpected events that create the biggest returns over time.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, so dive more into this, Wally, because I know you've got lots to say on this topic.
Well, the big thing is you just do good math and look at the relationships and you just go for it. Trust the math. I mean, and this is not super duper algebraic or anything. It's just simple addition and subtraction, and maybe even throw a little multiplication and division in there, and that's all it is.
But most of it is fifth grade level math, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so just do good math.
Yeah. Tell me a little, what is the math you are doing? Because if we're doing everything today, what are the variables we need to know?
Well, what we need to know is, okay, what we have to sell. You understand what I'm saying? If we have something to sell.
So we have inventory of our own.
So we have something to sell, then we compare it to what we can buy back. And if we can sell what we have, buy back at a good profit, then we do it. If we can't, then we just keep the animals and go on down the road a little further. And in that equation, you find, you've got to know what it's going to cost you to do it.
Okay. So again, that is, we have our inventory. So animals, let's say we have 500-pound calves and 600-pound calves. We might have some 4-year-old cows. We might have some 3-year-old bulls. We might have 200 heifers that are that are 700 pounds, all that stuff. So we know what those are, and we have a way to estimate what they are worth, correct? Market price. And then we know whether we're on grass or pasture or at our house, somebody else's house. We know what it costs to grow those animals, right?
And everybody talks about cost of gain. Well, cost of gain, the only time you know that's when it's over with.
Yep.
So what you have to do is you have to work on your daily costs. It costs you $1 a day to grass and 50 cents a day for protein or whatever your costs are.
And if I don't pay myself a cost, what number should I use there?
What do you mean if you don't pay yourself a cost?
Let's say I own the ranch and I don't pay myself any rent. Are there some proxies we can use there?
What you need to do is just figure out what the country around you get leases for. That's what you got to charge yourself.
Perfect. And so we in many cases can use our own numbers to estimate that. But if we don't have a way to do that, then just use like a local custom grazing rate.
Tell you, like every paper that I read, get a hold of your local county extension representative.
This is something they're actually very good for, right?
Yes.
They can give you a regional average. Okay, great. Now we can also figure that out from our financials, right? We can take our overhead costs and we can divide them by, the number of animals we run and the pounds we put on, that sort of thing. But a simpler way is,
for me, what you need to do is you need to know the area's costs, and then you need to know your costs. And you may discover that you're either very reasonable or you're very high and you need to really rethink your business.
Very good. Okay. All right. So keep going. I interrupted you.
So let's stray off of this a little bit and let's talk about things that are going on. You understand what I'm trying to say? Stuff. Okay. They talk about, like right now, well, the cow slaughter is high and we're still...
Oh, boy. We're going to talk about macro trends, huh? Okay.
There's numbers out there.
Yes.
That if you have 46% to 48% of the kill, and what I'm talking about the cattle kill is if cows or females are 46 to 48%, then we have a stable herd.
Okay, so there's a flow of cattle going to slaughter. And what you're saying is if less than half of those, so 46 to 48%, less than half of those are female,
yep,
then we assume that our herd is stable. Okay?
Correct. And if it drops down into the low 40s, that means there's rapid herd expansion going on.
Okay, so what's happening is we're assuming that we start kind of with a 50-50 birth rate, 50% female, 50% male. As we retain more and more heifers, those heifers don't go into the stream that gets killed, right? So they get taken out. And we often see the price of heifers relative to steers increase at that point, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And that means that we are rebuilding our herd, right? That as a nation, we are, yeah.
And where we are at today is the female kill was 52%.
Okay, meaning more than half the animals going to slaughter right now are female. So that means that our herd of females would be declining.
Liquidation is still roaring forward.
Okay. And that can be driven by drought, that can be driven by price, that can be driven by any number of factors, right? But all we know is that we are not retaining females at a level that causes our herd to rebuild.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Wally, you are going to sell a cow for how much right now? Good 3-4-year-old cow.
$3,000.
All right. Very good. And you are going to buy a small heifer.
350-pound heifer for $1,200.
$1,200. All right. And how much is it going to cost you to get her back to a pregnant cow?
It's going to cost me $650 to get her to being a bred heifer.
Okay. And so what that means is we've kind of completed the circle and made, we're going to say a bred heifer. They're not exactly the same, but a bred heifer and a bred 3-year-old, 4-year-old cow are going to be equivalent for cash flow the coming year, correct? They're both going to have a live calf and neither one of them is going to be doing any depreciating. Is that fair?
Correct.
So if we take $3,000, which is the cash you take away from the sale, and we take away the $1,200 that is required to buy her the replacement back, and then we subtract the $650, which is the cost of keeping her, okay, the cost of running her back until she is pregnant. Now we are left over with $1,150. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, in your way of doing the math, you then figure the return is the 1,150 divided by the 3,000. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we come up with a 38% return on that. So that is $1,150 divided by our initial investment of $3,000. Comfortable with that?
Yep. Very comfortable. Thing we've done there is we picked up time on those heifers.
Now explain that.
Well, those 3 and 4 year old cows are 2 years older than 2 and 3 years older than these heifers. So I've traded back to time, and that's an important thing to do. Now, I would just as soon keep these 3 and 4 year old heifers and sell some older cows, but I don't have them.
Meaning you'd rather sell a 5-6 year old cow.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. But you don't have them, so that's not what you're doing.
Those $3,000 heifers, are going to kick out easily a $1,500 calf, and it costs me $700 to run one. So there is $800 margin in there, and $800 divided by 3,000 is what? That's not a bad return.
Not bad either. It's going to be a little more than 25%, right?
No.
So, but let's revise that. That's 26%. So let's revise that just slightly, because if we say we can buy a heifer right now for $1,200, I'd be comfortable even saying you're going to get a $1,200 calf out of those girls. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. But either way, what we're talking about is a significant positive return right there that does a couple of things. It puts cash in our pocket in the near term.
Yes.
Finances our operation for the coming year.
Yes.
And effectively allows you, in my mind, to sort of lock in or capture this wonderful appreciation that's happened in this heifer over the last 2 years.
That is correct.
And you're still in the production business.
I'm still in business.
At Ranch Right LLC, we believe your ranch deserves more than just survival mode. You deserve to thrive. Our experienced accountants and business coaches will help you get control over your financials so you can focus on what you do best, running the ranch. We offer a comprehensive process that includes bookkeeping, consulting, and even training tailored to your needs. Don't let your financials slow you down. Visit ranchrightllc.com to schedule your free consultation and let Ranchright take care of the numbers so you can take care of the rest of it.
Now, one thing everybody's going to say, those 350-pound heifers ain't any good.
Oh, of course not.
And my answer to them is that every heifer was 350 pounds sometime in their life.
That's right.
And the reasoning this is I want to keep my capital down as much as I can, because if I was to go buy a 500-pound heifer, you understand what I'm saying, at $3 a pound or whatever they're selling for, now that's $1,500, that's $300 more. And I can put that weight on cheaper than I can.
Then you can buy it. Now, one thing you got to understand that we're doing here is we are going to go through, I realize every heifer is not going to breed. Yep.
This thing is designed that we can make money buying these heifers and just run them as feeder heifers. And anything that gets bred is just a bonus.
Yep. So a feeder heifer would be the open. And this is the part that I absolutely love about this system that's the most genius. Because if we look, now again, we always do the math. We never follow a recipe, blah, blah, blah. But when we look in the fall, often the most undervalued animals are light heifers, correct?
Light heifers, yep.
And when they are heavy heifers in the fall, so let's talk about the difference between a 4 or 5 weight heifer versus a 7, 8, or 9 weight heifer. They're pretty close to not undervalued in the fall, right? They're usually overvalued in the fall.
Correct.
And they're big. So literally in the same month, by keeping that same calf for a year, we are very frequently running her from an undervalued position to an overvalued position, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So we can keep the same animal and put her at the sale at two different points of her life in the same month and have it work out pretty well in our favor most of the time.
Correct.
Okay.
And on the flip side of that, one thing you can do is these heifers, since we are intending on breeding all of them,
Yes.
we can 179 deduct them.
Now, what do you mean by that?
What a 179 deduction is that you can write off the total purchase price
Okay.
of the animal.
Yeah, it is an accelerated depreciation on our taxes, meaning that instead of depreciating them like a normal female or using them as a cost of goods sold, which is often an expense the next year that we deduct, we can take them as an expense, a full expense in the current year, and we can even elect different levels. Correct? We can take it as full, we can take it as part, but we can accelerate that depreciation to benefit us on our taxes.
And so we do that. And so that offsets the money that we made on those cows. And you flip over to the next year and half of them don't breed and you sell them.
Yeah.
And so you have to go back and reclaim, that income, but you don't have to pay self-employment tax on that income, I think.
And we've used it for a year in the middle, right?
We've used it for a year in the middle. Another thing is by buying those little light heifers is our basis in them when we sell them for a cow is lower, so we can create more capital gains on the sale of those heifers.
Yep. And I've come to a realization here in the last few years and it just sort of jumped at me one day. I hear people that talk about avoiding capital gains. And in my mind, poor people avoid capital gains and rich people try to get capital gains.
And another thing is, in my humble opinion, whenever you hear somebody says, well, don't worry about it, just pay the taxes, they have not paid taxes.
Or certainly not enough.
Not enough. And you can manage, everything's got two sides to it. You can either do a poor job of managing taxes and go buy you a new pickup and aluminum trailer and yada, yada, yada. Or you can invest in these little heifers and really benefit from it.
Okay. I like it. Yeah. And the thing about this from a tax standpoint is that you are managing your taxes and staying in business, right? So the buyback is all about staying in business. If you do the right buyback, you stay in business and reduce your tax burden, where you are actually getting the government to fund your business's growth.
Correct. And like I said, people, they get talking about, and there is people that do stupid things on taxes, but you can do very smart things on taxes.
Absolutely. And again, I want to reemphasize, because one of the reasons this comes up, and I appreciate this from our friends that work in the education business, which you and I really don't, that you often have to speak to your audience. And we both know that most people spend far too much time worrying about tax management when they really should be worrying about being profitable. And I think ultimately that's the message they are trying to give, which is focus first on being profitable.
Oh, you've got to be profitable.
Right. Because too many people avoid profitability and in the process of avoiding taxes, right? And what you really need to be is profitable and pay low taxes. But we both know that if we're in a losing business, we don't need to be worrying about taxes.
That's correct.
Okay. And I do enjoy visiting with our educator friends about that, because it's a great opportunity for us.
It just gives us something to talk about.
Yep. And you'll hear an episode that I did here with Dallas Mountain not very long ago where we talked about that exact thing. So good. Okay. Anything else we want to talk about in the current market? You, I know, are high right now on light females, which is great. I think we have some real opportunities to both sell and buy cows. I see different parts of the country where cows are actually still a wonderful buy.
And one thing what you need to understand is you need to understand the intrinsic value of a cow. And what the intrinsic value of a cow is if you take her slaughter value,
yep,
the value of a 500-pound calf,
Yeah. So we take the cull price of the cow. So let's call her a 1,250 pound cow. And right now, a lot of those are selling, let's say, at just $1.40 a pound. Is that reasonable? Okay. So that's her cull price. So 1,250 times $1.40 is 1,750.
Okay. And then you take a 500-pound calf.
Okay. And what do we think those are worth?
They're going to be worth about $3.25 now.
Let's call it $3 for easy figuring. Is that all right?
So why don't you just come up with the numbers?
Because I prefer to ask you and then modify it.
Yeah.
So we've got $1,500 in the calf. Let's just say it's a number we already talked about. That you brought that up earlier. That's why.
You add those two numbers together.
Yeah. So that's 1,750 plus 1,500. So we're at 3,250 of potential income from that cow.
Yep. And then you take that times 0.95.
Now why do you do that?
The reason you do 0.95 is they all aren't going to get back to the pen to ship.
All right. There's going to be some law. Might be some disparity.
This is a safety factor there.
You make that number bigger in certain eastern states, or do you want to leave that?
I'm not going there.
Good.
Because I'm not there anymore.
If I take 3,250 and I multiply it by 0.95, I get 3,087.5, $3,087.50. So what do I do with that number?
And then you subtract $700 to carry that calf for a year.
Cow for a year, right?
The cow or the calf.
Cow and calf. Okay. It's $700 a year, just simple math.
And then you need to put in interest in there and some stuff. And this $700 I quoted you was a quote that I can run a cow for a year. You understand what I'm saying? That's paying all the labor, everything, you know. And so if you're running a ranch, in theory, you could probably almost live on that, you know.
But that's a buck 90-ish a day, $1.92 a day kind of thing. And again, that includes some stuff which is directly on the ranch, but that also would include interest and a few other things, right?
So what does that come to, my friend?
That leaves you with $2,387.50. So I took the $3,087.50. I subtracted $700. And so let's just we'll do some rounding here. We'll say it's $3,000 minus $700. That gets us to $2,300.
So with that, you know, there is cows, depending on where they're at, you can buy cows for $1,500 to $1,900 in places.
I think you can buy cows from $1,500 to about $4,000 right now, but.
Well, that's true, you know.
Maybe the intrinsic value tells you probably shouldn't run out and spend $4,000.
So, you know, that's what you need to do.
Okay, so I want to talk more about the intrinsic value. The intrinsic value is an attempt to bring the value of a cow back and her future production back to today. So the reason we deduct that cost to keep her, the cost to advance her a year, is because we are adjusting with what we pay for her by what it's going to cost us to get her to the next stage, right? To where we have a calf that's ready to wean by her side.
Yep.
And if that intrinsic value is, I'm just going to say it's $2,300 or $2,400, the way we did it. That means that that's roughly our break even. That's what having that cow is worth today. So if I could buy a cow for $1,500, that means I am buying her for significantly less. Let's say $900 less than her intrinsic value. That's a huge gain. And if I was buying her for $3,000 or $4,000 or, let's say $4,000, then that would be a significant loss. But if I could sell her for $3,000, that is also a significant gain, right? So that intrinsic value, the greatest thing about this number, and better than anything else in the world of investing that I know of, we can calculate a real intrinsic value. Now we can do that, for stocks and bonds and all kinds of things based on some fairly complex formulas. But this is actually a system that I love. And when I first saw Bud teach this really changed my world, because suddenly there was something to index to, right? And when we talk about our cows overpriced or underpriced, effectively, this intrinsic value is what we are comparing to, correct?
And then the next step on that, let's just say we buy a 3-year-old cow in this deal. She has a lot more value, because value to me is because she's going to be worth a lot more, probably.
She's probably still increasing in value, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So it's the calf plus whatever we might be able to get for her. Okay. All right. Very, very good. Now, this summer to me does not look like 15, 16. 15, 16, I think we had a cooler than expected July sale and a much worse than expected August sale. I thought looking through the market offering this year through Superior that we had prices kind of lower than everybody expected, but good quality calves still sold for good money, and there didn't appear to be a real directional trend. Do you care about any of that?
No.
Because again, it comes down to the relationships, right?
Comes down to relationships, and today, you understand what I'm trying to say.
Good. Do we make more money in an up market or a down market?
To be right honest with you, now it depends on if you're in the cow-calf business or the cow business or the stocker business. If you're in the cow business, you get a up market, you hold your costs constant. You understand what I'm saying? You hit a home run, In the stocker business, we hit a home run 1 year, and then after that, we're back to just slugging it out in the coal mine, with one exception is that our capital doesn't go near as far, or, we can't handle as many animals and stuff.
Yep.
But it's back to all relationships. When we had in 2014, when we went from $2,900 down to $1,050 cows.
Yep.
The $1,050 cows had just about as good return on investment because the cost of our heifer was so much less. Now, granted that our equity was hammered, you understand what I'm saying?
And that's where we need to be careful with our borrower, right?
Yep. But we had built up huge amounts of cash, so we were in wonderful shape.
Yeah. And you could buy animals for a lot less money.
That's correct.
Okay. Very good. Wally, thank you for joining us today. You have a couple of schools coming up where you teach this kind of thing. You want to tell us about your fall schedule briefly?
That's correct. We got a stocker school coming up here, and you need to be an extra special person to come to it because extra special people are going to be teaching it. I'm just kidding. And that is September the 9th.
Hang on. Explain a little more detail of that because you've got Don Notto working on
Don Notto is going to be there to teach stockmanship, and Steve Campbell's going to be there to talk about nutrition and health, and it's going to be a good school.
Good.
And then I got 2 marketing schools, one in November and one in January. Go to my website.
Good.
And then we are going to do a school with ranching.fyi in Gillette, Wyoming, the 22nd. I think I need to get those down.
Late October, visit the ranching.fyi website.
And what that's going to be is we're going to work through simulations of just what we've been talking about.
Good. All right. I'm going to plug that just a little because one of the things we spend a lot of time talking about the fact that there is money to be made in down markets. Wally's financial history is proof of that. His most profitable years are not in the high market years, but honestly, in the year or two immediately following those years when everybody else is not doing as well. But this school is designed specifically to prepare us for big changes in the market. And one of the important things about big changes in the market is they often cause us emotional distress that often leads us to make bad decisions, to take bad actions. So this is one of the reasons why we teach the Zone Rancher class. That's all about maintaining your mentality. That's also on the FYI website. But this simulation class is designed to put you into the situation where the market is changing, where the market's high and you know it's going to drop. And let's see what we need to think about in order to be successful there. I'm going to give you a hint. It's no different than what we think about at any other time in the market, but it is significantly harder at these times to sort of isolate yourself from news that doesn't matter. So spoil alert there, but the answer remains the same, right? We do good math. We stay focused on today and we look for opportunities to buy back at a profit.
And one thing to understand, like my friend in Australia that teaches stockmanship over there, Jim Lindsay, attitude's everything. You got to work on your attitude.
Oh, man. Okay. Very good. We've got another version of the Zone Rancher class running now. I believe it's starting tomorrow, so I'm excited about that. We will have more editions of that class coming in the future, taught by Bob Palmer. But your classes in the fall and winter, you'll always run a few, and those are very, very valuable. If you need the basics of sell-by marketing, Wally is a great place to get it. So thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your thoughtful insights as we've talked about the markets. Thanks, Wally.
Thank you for tuning into the Ranchnomics podcast. We hope this episode helped you win today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend.